The inevitable unification between Judaism and Christianity. The two faiths are on course for unification. This process is described in Scripture, and nothing can prevent it. This is the second article presented on this site, and it deals with the coming Judeo Christian reconciliation, which will certainly take place in the near future. It will be the most powerful theological movement the world has ever known. Nothing can prevent Judaism and Christianity from eventually becoming a single faith, so powerful and sophisticated as to be unassailable by leftists or any other of the sons of Belial. This movement will start as soon as we understand what Jesus was fighting for, a matter that has never been clearly explained. Christians do not understand it because it is a Jewish matter, and Jews do not understand it because the rabbis do not want them to understand it. So let us defy the rabbis and examine the ultimate purpose of this great man. At the time when Jesus first began to visit the temple as a young boy, a criminal enterprise was underway, involving a clique of corrupt rabbis supported by callous Roman officials. They were in the process of creating an enormous religious racket, based upon a huge and mediocre collection of writings created by disobedient rabbis, in direct defiance of the express orders of Moses himself. This mediocre sea of drivel was known as the writings, and later as the Talmud. For financial gain, corrupt rabbis, in collusion with Roman officials, began to mingle the mediocre material in the Talmud with the oral law devised by Moses, and preach this third-rate rubbish to the people. Righteous and decent rabbis, and many thousands of devout citizens, were horrified at this travesty, because it was obvious that the mediocre drivel would swamp the oral law and destroy the nation's pride and passion for the covenant. This would cause the dreaded breach of the covenant and invoke the dire curse recorded in Deuteronomy 28-15. The young Jesus made an instant impression on the decent rabbis, who were astounded at his intelligence and his grasp of the entire religious philosophy. They immediately saw that this outstanding boy had the potential to lead the struggle to hold on to the oral law and the covenant. They therefore went to great lengths to teach and mentor him. He soon became the nation's greatest exponent of the oral law. He also fully understood the corruption of those who were advancing the Talmud. Of course, the Talmudists regarded the boy as a serious threat to their plans, and Jesus' mentors had to rush him into hiding, or the Talmudists and their Roman cronies would have murdered him without hesitation. There can be no doubt that the intense tuition and mentoring that Jesus received from the rabbis must have filled him with single-minded determination to save the covenant at any cost, and with an implacable anger against the corrupt rabbis and their Roman cronies. After 15 years in hiding from the murderous Romans and Talmudic rabbis, he began his campaign of preaching, show as many people as possible the power and clarity of the ancient oral law as opposed to the mediocrity taught by the Talmudic rabbis and the scribes who were committing this rubbish to paper. Of course, he became a threat to the ruthless rabbis and Romans who were conducting an extremely lucrative Talmud education industry. And they soon resolved that this troublesome Nazirite had to be stopped, whatever it took. They tried bribery, but of course it did not work, and that left only one solution. They would make the necessary arrangements to crucify him. We can only try to imagine what he went through, as duty compelled him to continue his struggle to save the oral law in the face of certain death by crucifixion. He had a clearer understanding than anyone else of the frightful national consequences of breaking the covenant, and he knew that the responsibility for keeping it alive was his alone. No one else could do it. The responsibility was his alone, and he shouldered it, knowing that an agonizing death awaited him at the end. It is hard to imagine what he went through, but we can only gain some inkling from Matthew 26 minutes and 39 seconds. When the fear and despair took hold of him and he fell down and wept, "O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done." His prophetic vision enabled him to see the catastrophic results of the breach of the covenant and the endless ages of misery that lay ahead for the Jewish people. He knew that the rabbis would falsely teach the Jewish people that the Talmud was indeed the oral law of Moses, and that they would convince the nation that Jesus had been their enemy. They would carry on this deception, possibly for thousands of years. He did not know how long this would last, for this was known only to God. However, the crucifixion would never be forgotten. and it would hound the Jewish people without mercy, until they eventually understood the evil nature of their rabbinate and the courage and sacrifice of Jesus. The Christians would observe this process. It would gain greater insight into the life and struggle of this great man. In the near future, when this finally takes place, the ferocious reaction against the rabbis will mark the beginning of the great reconciliation between Christians and Jews. And a great movement will arise that will correct the ills of our society for 1,000 years.